In this video, we'll go over 10 more cards that have great effects when sent to the graveyard from anywhere, be it as cost, effect, material, or anything in between. And starting off at number 10, we have the White Stone of Legend. This is a level 1 dragon tuner, and if it's sent to the graveyard in any way, you add a Blue Eyes White Dragon from your deck to your hand. Believe it or not, this little egg coming out produced the first time anyone was given a good reason to sleeve up a Blue Eyes since maybe the very first format of the game. While searching a vanilla level 8 doesn't seem that good by itself, there were a lot of supporting cards that would make this all into a useful package. Firstly, you had Cards of Consonance, a spell card that lets you discard a dragon tuner with less than 1000 attack to draw 2 cards. If it wasn't clear enough that you're supposed to use these 2 cards together, they literally have this card on Consonance's artwork. Using 2 cards to draw into 2 more is always a really powerful effect. This was the time where Allure of Darkness was still limited to 1 after all. But this one was even better than that, since you'd actually go up in card advantage after pitching it. Of course, you're only adding a 2 tribute effectless monster, but there are tons of ways to convert it afterwards with either trade-in or Magical Stone Excavation, allowing you to keep powering through your deck. But perhaps the most broken interaction was between the stone and the pre-errata version of Future Fusion, which would let you dump 5 dragons from your deck to the graveyard instantly by revealing 5-headed dragon. Send 3 stones, and that's the easiest +3 you've ever seen. Finally, since the stone itself is a level 1 tuner, it can also be normal summoned and used for a synchro play and still get you your ad. The stone ended up seeing play in a variety of dragon decks throughout the years, at first being the glue that tied together Dragon Turbo. This style of deck aimed to use Super Rejuvenation, a card that draws more cards equal to the number of dragons discarded or attributed in a turn, which could very often draw 10 depending on how much was chained. Best of all, since Super Rejuve is a quick play, if you draw into more copies of it as its effect resolves, you can activate the new one and go through almost your entire deck. Still, it wasn't only a mainstay in there, as the little tuner would also be a really neat piece in Dragon Rulers, who of course loved having tons of dragons in hand to discard and then later in the graveyard to banish for their effects. And of course, it would also see play in Blue Eyes once they got their first big wave of real support, as nothing is more fitting for the deck than a brick that adds yet another brick. And yeah, it sees 0 play nowadays, and the modern iteration of Blue Eyes wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. But this was still one of the first times a card was really relevant due to how easy it was to trigger its graveyard effect, making it one of the best ways to start out this list. And coming in at number 9, we've got Farfa, Malebranche of the Burning Abyss. This is a level 3 Dark Fiend that can special summon itself from your hand as long as you have no spells or traps on your side of the field. Plus, if it's sent to the graveyard, you can target a monster on the field and banish it until the end phase. However, you can only use one of these effects each turn. And also, if you control a monster that's not a Burning Abyss, it instantly destroys itself. Farfa was essentially the first good disruptive graveyard effect that was really easy to use due to the total lack of restrictions besides binning this card. The card, of course, began seeing play in BA decks, alongside a ton of other monsters that could just as well have been on this list. Despite what their summoning conditions might tell you, Burning Abyss decks started out playing a lot of back row, specifically discard traps, since both getting their main effects off as well as triggering the BA you pitched for cost was often a really huge swing. While most Burning Abyss monsters plussed you when you discarded them, Farfa would instead offer a more proactive role, letting you pick off 2 monsters from the field at once when paired with, say, a Karma Cut. It was also great insurance to make sure you wouldn't die in the crackback. A live Farfa in the field would make it really hard for your opponent to kill you unless you had a way to banish it somehow. And if it was safely tucked under a Dante instead, surviving another turn was all but guaranteed. Despite not being one of the BAs to actually get hit on the ban list like Raph, Farfa was always one of the most annoying parts of the deck. And it would only get better with the release of Beatrice, when it'd become one of the best ways to convert her foolish effect into disruption. The reason why it was chosen for this list is because it ended up being the most played of the main deck BAs, due to how easy it was to slot in other strategies. Its use as a tech began at Necros format when dealing with a ritual made with Djinn was a really big issue. Djinn's effect would prevent you from special summoning entirely, and since it did so by applying a lingering effect to the monster it used to make, it wasn't something a simple negate like Forbidden Chalice could get rid of. A really clean way to deal with it was to play Armageddonite and use its summon effect to dump a Farfa and banish that monster. While sure, it would just come back during the end phase, being able to play the game until then was all you needed. Additionally, due to how the rules work, the monster would also forget that the Djinn was used as a material, and thus lose the lingering effect once it came back to the field. Fiend Griefing would also let a lot of decks use Farfa generically, since it also dumps a Fiend for its effect, making it into both field and graveyard disruption at once. Even Labyrinth could be seen tagging this monster as a target for Arcfiend's Ghastly Glitch, and they can even turn it into a hand trap through discarding it with the Furnitures on your opponent's first turn. Even in something like Branded, it wouldn't feel out of place, as Lubellion lets you Foolish for any dark through Branded Fusion. Farfa is not that flashy, but it does what it's supposed to in every deck it's put in. And at number 8, we have Shaddoll Apkallone. This is a level 6 Dark Spellcaster fusion that takes any 2 Shaddolls with different attributes as materials. It must first be fusion summoned and can't be destroyed by battle, and when it's special summoned, it can target and negate the effects of a face-up card on the field permanently. Also, if it's sent to the graveyard, you can add a Shaddoll card from your deck or graveyard to your hand and then discard 1 card. Apkallone is basically the main reason why Shaddolls are still playable even now, even if its Floodgate fellow Winda is still the one who gets all the hate when it comes to the archetype. The release of Apkallone really enabled Shaddoll to be played as an engine rather than its own deck, in a more powerful and compact package than ever before. While all the other Shaddoll fusions do float when sent to the graveyard, only this one can add cards from your deck to your hand. The first deck to really abuse this was Dogmatica Invoked Shaddoll strategies. Alistair would play the bodyguard role and let you easily summon out Mechaba to make sure either your Nadir Servant or Dogmatica Maximus would go through, dumping Apkallone to search Shaddoll Schism. What does Schism do that's so well worth it? Well, it does what Shaddoll decks have been known for since forever. Bring out Winda to floodgate your opponent as a quick effect, and even with the bonus effect of sending an opponent's monster to the graveyard. The best part about all of this was that you could absolutely get away with running no main deck Shaddoll monsters, removing the biggest downside of any Shaddoll package, the hellish amount of bricks. However, this wouldn't be the first nor the last time Apkallone was around, as even when IDS fell off, people would keep playing the Shaddoll engine as a board breaker instead. Shaddoll Fusion lets you fuse using materials from your deck if your opponent controls a monster that was special summoned from the extra deck, something which 99% of modern decks end on. Getting to Foolish 2 Shaddolls while also triggering Apkallone's effect to negate can swing the tide of almost any game, as you could send a Dragon to deal with back row, Ariel for the graveyard, and even Genius for monsters. All of these effects are neatly arranged in a chain of your choice, so your opponent wouldn't be able to negate the least important one, of course. This all does require that you put some bricks in your deck too, but sometimes it's worth trading consistency for more ceiling. In any case, these main deck Shaddolls also feel much less worse if you can just free fuse with them normally, making this package substantially better in decks like Tearlament and Dracotail. The juice has to be worth the squeeze if it has these juggernauts from the modern era slotting in flip monsters from 2014 in their main deck, and you can thank Apkallone for all of that. And at number 7, we have Unchained Soul of Sharvara. This is a level 6 Fire Fiend with 2000 attack and 1500 defense. Its hand effect lets you target and destroy a face down card or a fiend monster you control to special summon it out as a quick effect. Also, if it's sent to the graveyard, you can set an Unchained spell or trap directly from your deck. Sharvara was the all-star that brought Unchained to the meta after spending years as a laughingstock. Its effect combined 2 hallmarks of modern Yu-Gi-Oh design. It is basically an in-archetype hand trap that, like many others, can be used on either your turn to dodge stuff like Imperm, or during your opponent's turn to trigger interruptions. Its floating effect also sets straight from the deck, bypassing stuff like Ash and Droll entirely. The floating effect being so easy to trigger was one of the main reasons why it was so hard to ever deal with Unchained. As a bit of extra context, the 2 main targets for Sharvara, Abominable Chamber of the Unchained and Escape of the Unchained, both trigger when they're destroyed to special summon Unchained monsters from the deck. Their on-field effects are also nothing to scoff at, either reborning your Unchained or popping your opponent's cards, meaning Sharvara's set could either represent more cards for you to pop and let you build an even stronger board, or they could just be part of your end board as is. If you start it with Tour Guide of the Underworld, you could bring out Fiendish Rhino Warrior, a monster that could very well have made this list, and then link them both for Yama. with it adding you an Aruha, while Rhino dumps Sharvara so that it has a target to pop. However, that wasn't where Sharvara's usefulness ended, as you'd end your combo with a board that had DDD Wave King High Caesar with the red dog underneath it. Not only would Caesar be able to negate up to 2 of your opponent's effects to special summon, it would do so while detaching Sharvara and triggering its effect yet again, generating even more follow-up. Because of Yama having completely generic materials, it also became possible to splash an Unchained engine in any Fiend deck by running just Sharvara and any of the traps. If you get any 2 bodies and link them into Yama, you can add Sharvara and bring it out and then link summon an Unchained Soul of Rage and set Escape from your deck. This is like 3 interruptions and follow-up for very low cost, and so it became something you would see in Live Twins, Yubel, and even Labyrinth sometimes. Sharvara might not be seen play in the highest echelons of the meta anymore, but it still being in the semi-limited status stands as a testament for its short-lived legacy. And at number 6, there's Snake Eyes Poplar. This is a level 1 Fire Pyro with the following effect. If it's added to your hand, except by drawing it, you can special summon it out. When it's summoned, you can add a Snake Eyes spell or trap from your deck to your hand. Lastly, if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can target a fire monster in your graveyard and place it face up in your spell and trap card zone as a continuous spell. The release of Poplar quite literally plunged the game into an age of fire. We'd go on to see a whole year where Snake Eye variants were at the top of the metagame. This card, special summoned itself out for free, not only allowed Snake Eyes Ash to be full combo, it also could turn the Pyro Rhoda Bonfire into an E-Telly too. Poplar could then add Original Sins or the Field Spell to your hand, both of which let you extend your combos while also giving you additional ways to beat hand traps. However, still one of the best things about Poplar was its graveyard effect, though it might not sound as useful as its other ones. One of the best things about the other Snake level 1s, Ash and Oak, was that they could send themselves and another card from the field to the graveyard to bring out Snake Eyes Flamebird Dragon from your hand or deck. That's one of the best boss monsters of the modern era, giving you a huge beat stick, removal, extension, and interruption on your opponent's turn, all in a single package. Either way, Poplar essentially made it free for you to send that additional card from your field, as you can just link its body off and make Poplar put itself into the spell and trap card zone. This also made it amazing to open Poplar plus Witch, since you can use her to send the Poplar and then it will not only chain block, but also give you a free fodder for original to send. This is only scratching the surface of how useful this graveyard effect really was though, as both Flameberg and the field spell can special summon monsters from the spell and trap card zone, letting you use it to set up a pseudo monster reborn. Even Rescue Ace was pretty happy to run Bonfire just for Poplar, since not only would it let you add Hydrant, it could even be used later to put the Hydrant into the spell trap card zone. This would turn on the bonus effects of all of your Rescue Ace back row, because Hydrant was technically on the field, even if not as a monster. This card's utility would only get better with the release of Snake Eyes Diabellstar, a monster that could just bring itself out of the spell trap card zone to the field. Love it or hate it, the impact Snake Eyes had on the game cannot be understated. While they've been banned off the meta in the TCG, variants are still viable in Master Duel to this day, even though most of their important cards have been limited. And at number 5, we have Bystial Saronir. This is a level 6 Dark Dragon with 2500 attack and 2000 defense. It can target and banish a light or dark in either graveyard to special summon itself to the field. And this is a quick effect if your opponent controls a monster. Also, if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can send a Bystial monster or a branded spell or trap from your deck to the graveyard. Bystials are a series of extremely strong hand traps that have been meta relevant in almost every single format since their release. Graveyard disruption is key in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! And if DD Crow was good enough to see play, then of course Bystials are gonna feel amazing to drop on an unsuspecting opponent. Granted, they can only be used on either lights or darks, but it feels like over half of playable monsters are these attributes anyway. Saronir might be the most vanilla fill-in of the bunch when used as a hand trap, but the few decks that can make good use of its floating effect more than justify its existence. If you're running an actual Bystial engine in your deck, this is actually one of the best ones to have, since its graveyard effect lets you dump either Bystial Lubellion, which can summon itself back from the graveyard later, or Branded Regain, which can be sent back to the field with Branded Beasts. However, even if you're not that far deep into the Dark Dragons, it can still provide plenty of use. Take Tyr for example, being able to randomly get this effect after a big mill could be plenty useful. as it would further thin your deck and let you chain block other more useful effects like the ones that let you fuse. Even random Fiend decks can end up using Saronir to dump Bystial Magma Hut, so they can later bring it back with an Abo Q for a free search. But this is all, of course, without even getting into the deck where this was the strongest, Branded. Getting a foolish burial goods for free in the deck is simply insane, as there are a ton of cards that plus you for being sent to the graveyard like Retribution and Sword, and if you don't need either, you can just get some added protection to your fusions through Branded opening. One of the most insane Branded combos was having a Branded and High Spirits plus Saronir, which you could reveal and discard to dump a monster from your extra deck, and then search a monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz. This sets up your graveyard, gets you to Branded Fusion, gets you a backup if your opponent ashes it. It's basically everything you could want off of a 2-card combo and more, though it's not as generically powerful as either of the limited Bystials. When Saronir is in a deck it synergizes with, it puts in the work. And at number 4, we have Eclipse Twins. This is a rank 4 light warrior monster that takes 2 level 4s to be made, but you can also treat rank 4 monsters you control as level 4s for its summon. Its effect on the field lets you detach a material to let this card attack monsters twice during the battle phase this turn. But more importantly, if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can target 2 other rank 4 or lower monsters in your graveyard, and then special summon one of them with the other one attached as a material. As a Ryziel card in all but name, it's impossible to talk about how good this is without going a bit over the archetype. So Ryziel is a rank 4 spam deck whose best monster is a non-once per turn pop, and its best extender dumps an Xyz from your extra deck as cost to summon itself. Is there more to say? The access to twins made Ryziel become one of the most resilient decks we've ever seen. While you do need 2 different Xyz in the graveyard besides it for the effect to be alive, it'd be hard to not do that with any given Ryziel hand. While sure, the effect would often not be live when you first dumped it with X'd, it would eventually get attached to your detonator through its on-summon effect at the end of your combo, letting it be live during your opponent's turn. This made it really annoying to deal with, as even if you had top-decked into an imperm to stop detonator, they could chain its effect to destroy itself in response, which would trigger twins and then bring back the detonator with 2 pops live. However, when twins became even scarier was in the following turns of the game, and this is why a lot of lists even ran 2 of this card in the extra deck. If you get to start off your turn by going X to dump twins and reborn a duo drive, who will come out ready to do its double search effect again, there's no way you are ever going to lose that duel. Still, these 2 were probably the more innocuous use of twins, at least when it comes to Konami's eyes. If your deck played a Mitsurugi engine, you could use twins mid-combo to bring back a King of the Feral Imps and trigger its effect to search again. And even more annoyingly, it could also bring back Evilsworn Ouroboros to reuse its hand destruction effect. Whether you're adding 2 or hand ripping for 2, twins has you covered. Both of these interactions were so strong that both King and Ouroboros got banned, though only one in the TCG while the other in the OCG. This is all to show that no matter the format, Twins has the potential to be one of the most degenerate effects you can trigger in your graveyard. And at number 3, we have Herald of the Arclight. This is a level 4 light fairy synchro monster that can be made with any tuner plus 1 or more non-tuners. Its first effect makes it so that any monster sent from the hand or deck to the graveyard is banished instead. Also, when your opponent activates a spell, trap, or monster effect, you can tribute this card to negate the activation and destroy it. Lastly, if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can add a ritual monster or spell from your deck to your hand. Despite being over a decade old, Herald of the Arclight really reads like a modern card. It has 3 amazing effects which let it see play in a variety of decks, and it is only somewhat balanced by how going into a Synchro 4 is a bit awkward, and that its stats are low enough for it to get beaten over in battle by almost anything. At the very least, most of the decks that do manage to summon it, like Yummy nowadays and Yang Zings back then, definitely do not play a ritual in their main deck to get the full package. Not that you need to, however, as if you look into the card's past, you'll see plenty of examples of this being played solely for its graveyard effect. This actually started out as far back as Necrons with their Kaleidoscope ritual spell, which lets you ritual summon Necrons monsters using monsters from your extra deck as material. With Necrons of Unicorn being a level 4, this play lets you search your entire deck while also bringing out your archetypal skill drain. Though Necrons didn't need this specific interaction to be viable, as they were plenty overtuned for their time, Arclight is definitely one of the main reasons why ritual decks are sometimes viable, despite it being such a terrible mechanic in a vacuum. Later on, we'd see the release of Diviner of the Herald, a level 2 monster that can dump Herald with her on-summon effect, as well as float into a fairy when tributed, making for a really power Cryptomanju for all intents and purposes. This was pretty big for Drytron to fetch their Ben 10, which was a core card for the deck, as it lets you continuously search for cards as you use it as fodder to bring out your Drytron bodies. It was also really important in Voiceless Voice, as between dumping Herald and Trias, you would get access to either your rituals or the prayers of the Voiceless Voice. However, there is also yet another, even more powerful way to abuse Arclight, and that is with the Dogmatica package. Nadir's Servant dumps a card from your extra deck to search for Dogmatica, and while you can't search much by dumping Herald due to your search target needing to equal or less the attack of whatever you sent, what you can do is send a Garuru instead. This nets you a draw, but also lets you search for Maximum, who can then use its effect to dump 2 more cards from your extra deck to the graveyard, which one of them can be your Herald to search another card. Granted, activating either Nadir or Maximus does lock you out of the extra deck. Ritual decks usually aren't big on that anyways, and it's not like an interaction that makes you go +3 would be without its downsides either. There's no doubt that Herald will continue to see play either as a great endboard piece or as a card to be dumped from the extra in the years to come, unless of course it gets banned, which is a very real possibility after it was put to 1 on a recent list. And at number 2, we have Mereologic Aggregator. This is a rank 9 Dark Cybers Xyz that takes 2 or more level 9s to be made. When this card is Xyz summoned, you can send any monster from your extra deck to the graveyard. While it's on the field, it lets you target monsters in your graveyard up to the number of materials this monster has and exchange what's underneath it for those cards that you targeted in your graveyard. Lastly, if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can target a face-up card on the field and negate its effects until the end of the turn. While its effects are quite a mouthful, it's easy to talk about this card since you can just ignore everything before its graveyard effect. Mereological is exclusively used as something you dump from your extra deck to your graveyard to disrupt an opponent's field, making it very fitting for it to occupy the same rank as Natis did last time. This card is a staple in decks running Dogmatica Punishment, as its high attack lets you destroy most monsters and while negating something afterwards. Mereologic began seeing serious play the moment Ultimate Slayer was released, a spell that lets you dump a monster from your extra deck to spin an opponent's extra deck monster that shares the same extra deck type with it, and to boot, your opponent also cannot respond to this card with the monster effects. Being able to remove any problematic Xyz and then getting to disable any other of your opponent's cards is obviously an amazing deal. Slayer quickly became one of the best cards to have against Ryziel as a way to turn off their detonator that wouldn't trigger twins while also turning off their Dread field spell. Then with the release of Firewall Dragon Dark Fluid, Neo Tempest Terahertz, we'd see plenty of combo decks running it as well, since you could dump Mereologic on your opponent's turn due to its Cybers typing. This package saw plenty of play in Mathmech, Rescue Ace, and Malice too. Then of course, there's the deck where this card was perhaps the most annoying, Ryziel. Not only can it just be dumped for free off of X Ryziel, giving you a free chain block plus a negate when going second, it can also be attached to your detonator as a material from the graveyard, letting you get a negate whenever you use its effect to pop 2. These interactions were so important, it wasn't even that uncommon to see people running a couple of Mereologics in Ryziel, just so that you could have one for the follow-up turn as well, at least before Twins came out. This card only became more relevant as the Malice Ryziel period solidified itself into a 2-deck format, prompting people to run Metaltronus in their lists. While Detonator was the target of choice when going up against Ryziel, Mereologic being in your extra gave the card a ton of flexibility, as since it is a Dark Cybers, it can negate every single Malice monster while giving you a body that will yet again negate when it's linked off later. While the niche for extra deck monsters with a generic disruption effect might be getting quite overloaded nowadays, with the old Natis, Mereologic, Malong, and even the new Valon making its ranks, Mereologic stands above the rest in how relevant it's been to the game in recent times. And finally at number 1, we have Fiendsmith Desirae. This is a level 9 Light Fiend fusion with 2800 attack and 2400 defense. Its materials being a Fiendsmith Engraver and 2 other Light Fiend monsters. It can, as a quick effect, negate cards on the field up to the total link rating of link monsters equipped to it until the end of the turn. Also, if it's sent to the graveyard, you can shuffle another Light Fiend monster from your graveyard back into the deck to target a card in the field and send it to the graveyard. Though it's died down quite a bit now, both because of new releases and some hits on the ban list, there was a huge period of time where Fiendsmith was simply everywhere, and Desirae is in no small part why. This card is highly synergistic with its engine, It's very easily made with their link to Fiendsmith sequence, who also has the effect to equip itself to Desirae, making having the negate up a given 99% of the time. It requiring 3 different monsters may seem like a huge ask at first, but the whole thing was fulfilled by going Moon into Requiem into Engraver, something you used to be able to do off of literally any 2 monsters. The first deck to use Fiendsmith to great effect was of course Snake Eyes, where Desirae usually would be used to its fullest. First of all, it would even help you as you comboed because you could use its effect to negate Promethean Princess from locking you into fires while it's face up on the field, letting you climb into an Appaloosa without having to get rid of it first. Then, it was also quite easy to trigger its graveyard effect during your opponent's turn, since you'd often also have an IP Masquerade to link it off after it had negated something. Still, it really can't be understated how this card was literally everywhere for a while, be it Yubel, Live Twin, or even in decks where the 2 main cores had no direct synergies like Bystial Fiendsmith. The engine became even more absurd when this strategy eventually got its level 4, Lacrima the Crimson Tears, which really allowed you to abuse Desirae's graveyard effect to heaven and beyond. The new line would have you go through a usual Fiendsmith combo to end with a High Caesar on field, with Lacrima and the Link 1 in the graveyard. So not only would you have Caesar to protect you from Nibiru, as well as disrupt your opponent during their turn, you would also get to use Lacrima's graveyard effect to bring back the Link 1 and immediately use its effect to go back into Lacrima, who could dump Fiendsmith Paradise. The trap could also be triggered in your graveyard whenever your opponent special summon to send Desirae from your extra deck to the graveyard, letting you pop a card on the field. This much interaction and follow-up generated for such low commitment is what allowed Fiendsmith Ryziel to be the strongest variant of the deck for a really long time, while also carrying lower powered engines like Odeon into decent competitive success. While some new releases did take the spotlight off of Fiendsmith for a bit, it still wasn't the weirdest thing to see Fiendsmith variants of either Yummy, K9, or Dracotel out there. While it is a bit harder to do all of that with the banning of Moon, Light Fiend decks still continue to have easy access to the line, and if Ryziel was still that relevant, it could still do the same thing through Exciton Knight. It was quite hard to pick the number 1 spot on this list. But when you look at the impact Desirae had on the game for what it could do both in and out of the graveyard, it can't be said not to deserve its spot here.